Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds
or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. Today, we're jumping right back into our fascinating conversation with Lee and her experiences in online dating. Let's get to it.
You know, you mentioned at the start of this, you mentioned AI.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes complete sense, but I also didn't totally think about it that way. Sure, AI may be helping you write something or AI organizing something for you. But how do you know? For the listeners out there that are on websites and things are even thinking of getting back into the game, I shouldn't call it a game, but getting back out there. But how do you recognize that this person is not real? I mean, is it the same way that you receive a phone call and that can you go buy me some, I need you to pay the bill by going to Walmart and buying me cards? What way, how do you think that okay, this is a scam or this is, not real?
Well, I ran into a lot of hackers and scammers when I first tried online dating, and some of the same rules apply, even though it's AI now. One thing that's in my favor is that I have an eagle eye for grammar and spelling and a turn of sentence. It's not an ego thing. It's absolutely not. But I am saying that I think that gave me an advantage where a lot of people are going to get suckered in who may not have that specific skill set. I do truly feel like you almost need a degree in English now if you're going to do online dating to help spot a lot of that, because the photos are almost never AI. Most of them are just stolen. So it's the writing itself that's a dead giveaway. There's very specific turns of phrase. There's very specific, there's one that I've learned that almost always corresponds to hacking, especially Nigerian hacking, is that someone says they're looking for a God-fearing woman. That's almost always in there. It's a lot of talk about religiosity. With the AI profiles, things are often written very much like a marketing or PR campaign for a vacation destination. Mm-hmm. There's typically sentences that move in what I call cycles of three, whatever the phrase is going to be, the person's going to give three examples of it separated by commas. It's too well written. It doesn't seem written by a human. In fact, I connected with someone maybe 2 months ago who I thought had a great profile. It was smart and funny, a little self-deprecating. It said enough, but not too much. I was hesitant because he was 10 years younger than me with 2 young kids in the home, and I wasn't convinced that he really had time for dating. Anyway, I gave him a chance though, and we were talking back and forth. And after a couple of weeks, I really started to feel like the way he texts and emails does not match how he wrote in his profile. And I've got to say something about that. This is not who I thought I was talking to, and I brought it up. And he laughed and said, "Oh, no, I didn't write it. I had AI write it. I just thought it would help give me an edge." And I said, "Well, in this case, it's kind of backfiring because I really liked what you wrote and connected with that. And you're not the same in writing. So for me, it's causing me to take a step back now." And again, that's about being thoughtful and intentional, being real from the get-go. And I found that thousands of people on these apps or thousands of men just really have very low self-esteem. And it shows in how they photograph themselves and what they say or don't say. They're not engaging from a place of confidence for the most part. And I can understand that. It's scary. It's threatening to go online. It feels the same way for me too. We've all been through a lot. You're not going to be around 50 without having been through a lot, right? The point isn't that you need to be perfect. The point is that you really want to come across in a way that shows you've chosen yourself already in life. You can't choose someone else without first choosing yourself. And maybe that's the therapist in me saying that. But profile after profile, I thought, wow, this guy, he doesn't even like his own self. He's not in a place to be able to like me. Mm-hmm. And I have already chosen myself. I'm fundamentally on my own side. And that includes owning the areas where I have a lot of growing to do or could improve in some way, right? I'm not hiding anything. The lack of effort, the poor choice of photos, it just it really across the board gave me a sense that there's a lot of people out there who are lonely and want to connect, but have no bandwidth to put any effort into making that happen.
Well, one thought that I really have when it comes to kind of online dating, and I don't know if it's the world of AI, I don't know if it's, actually been around a lot longer, but it's also to this mindset. And it doesn't matter if it's a male seeking, male or female, female seeking female or male. Like it doesn't have to do with like what we're looking for, but it's almost that idea that online dating is like going to a cafeteria
Mhm.
and checking, the box. So I'm ordering a sandwich and I want wheat bread and I want mayo and I want lettuce, tomato, and turkey. It's not saying I want a female woman who is 5'2" and 110 pounds with blonde hair and blue eyes who thinks I'm the funniest person alive. We don't kind of get that. And I think too many people, when they see a buffet or I should say almost an order, they think of it as an order form when they're swiping or when
Yes.
they're clicking that like, okay, well, you're not 5'2", but you do think I'm really funny. You're not 110 pounds, but you're 130. So that's okay. It's close enough. It's like, well, I ordered mayo, but all they have is Miracle Whip. So I'll take the Miracle Whip, I bet, as a consolation, like, but it's that kind of thing. And I think more people need to think about like they're real people too.
Real
Like,
people.
and we're real people in the same way that it's not a checkbox. And we often say, yes, does she check the box,
Mhm.
but not in a way that would potentially prohibit us from really being open in a realistic way to like
Yes.
trusting your gut. And what is it that's the
Trusting.
key thing?
Trusting your gut. I think that's huge. I love what you just said, Amy, because what I've seen online, what I've seen with friends, what I've seen with clients is this, as you said, this loneliness epidemic, this fantasy or desire or longing around being chosen, being pursued and wanted and chosen, whether the person checks all the boxes or not. And kind of the flip side of that being, well, if there's thousands of online profiles, I can skip this one that might have some things I like and some things I don't and hold out for the elusive perfect one. But I think that brings us back to knowing what it is you want when you join the apps, because what you're really doing is if you're on there to look for a relationship, what you're really doing is looking for a realistic person, not perfection. You have to know how to choose your battles, but that comes back to my silly analogy of making sure you bake your cake and have a life that you love, regardless of having a relationship. I heard a quote once that said, self esteem is not telling yourself that everyone's going to like you. Self esteem is telling yourself that you'll be fine even if they don't. And to me, that's the attitude that you need to carry into online dating is that you are looking for someone that checks enough of the right boxes, not every box, not a perfect fantasy, but enough of the boxes to be a right match for you, while also knowing that if you have not already baked your own cake, if you haven't already chosen your own self and built a life you love, if there's lack there already, you have work to do there before you're in the market for a partner.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You said that you met your husband
Hmm.
on the day that you took down your
Yes.
profiles
Yes.
based on your challenge from your friends.
Yes.
What was it about his profile
Mm.
that caught your eye on that day that you were done?
No one's ever asked me that question. That is a fantastic question. And it's a funny answer I'm going to give you because
Good.
it wasn't, I mean, he did have some decent written things. He did. And they were well written. Like he put effort in and he had decent photos. And it was none of that. It was 100% gut instinct and vibes. And I know that sounds crazy because keep in mind, I was not living in the state where I grew up. I was far away and he was in another state. And yet I just had this instantaneous sense that I knew him, so much so that as I'm closing down my account and I saw his profile, before I even knew what happened, I said to the computer, "Oh, there you are." It came out of my mouth before I even knew what happened. It caught me off guard. It's not just my personality, but it's also what I do for a living to be thoughtful and intentional about relationships. I don't just jump into things, but I just felt like I knew him, like he was my person, which turned out to be true. So when I had that reaction to the computer, I didn't tell anyone that because I thought if one of my own clients was doing online dating and said to me, I saw this guy in another state and I had this instant reaction and I said, oh, there you are, to the computer, I would have been working hard to slow them down and make sure that, that they weren't being impulsive or taking risks in some way. Right. So I got half of my brain understood that I had no data on which to base my reaction. The other half of me, which is a very spiritual side of me that's been present all my life. I've had a lot of experiences that I would really honestly describe as borderline psychic many times. And I trusted that side of me too. I was toggling between those two reactions, but I didn't do anything with it despite my reaction because first of all, my accounts were closing and I didn't want to spend to keep them open. And second of all, he was in another state. And I don't know if the listeners know this or not, but it is expensive, time consuming, and a massive headache to move a mental health practice license from one state to another. And I just wasn't interested in having to do that. But he reached out to me. And to make a long story short, we were engaged 6 months later. And I was moving to his state not long after that. And I remember telling him from time to time throughout our marriage that I had never dated anyone I would have been willing to move across town for. And moving cross country for him was easy. And I remember on my wedding day, the woman who was doing my makeup said I was the calmest bride she'd ever seen. And I said, well, I'm getting married late in life and I know who I am and I know what I want and I know who he is. And there's nothing about this that's causing me anxiety or stress. Like I was ready for that. So I guess maybe I'm trying to take the same approach as splitting my gut reaction, spiritual vibes, energy, whatever that is, plus logic and critical analysis and kind of put that all into one toolbox for online dating now.
I love that. That's such a great story.
Thank you.
I'm wondering too. So for anybody who's listening, who's thinking like they're taking the steps,
Right.
whether it's because they too are a widow, maybe they're divorced, maybe they've never married and they're just ready to get back into it after taking a break. You've mentioned throughout this whole conversation, like doing the work yourself, doing the work
Yes.
beforehand, obviously
Yes.
pertaining specifically to grief, but also just life in general,
Yes.
liking yourself, knowing who you are. What suggestions might you have for listeners who are getting ready to take this journey?
Mm.
What work on themselves or what questions could they ask themselves to really kind of think, am I ready for this? Because as you've mentioned, you've learned a lot through this process. And I'd
Mm.
love to hear what you've learned too, but it's not easy work. Dating is not easy work.
No, no, and people think it will be, but it's not. It's a roller coaster. You get your hopes up, and then then they crash, or you have to be in a place of potentially being able to handle rejection or not personalizing things and taking it as rejection if it's not. I mean, there's a lot of psychological and emotional gymnastics. Dating was a part-time job for 6 months because I checked those 4 platforms daily. It was a part-time job. It was time consuming. It was expensive. Those 4 platforms combined cost me under $1,000 just about. So I took it seriously. I think probably the first thing I would say is that someone just needs to get really, really clear about what they want out of it. If someone is just looking for casual fun or a hookup or a fling or I don't know, revenge dating to get back at their ex, like I think it's just important to know what you're after and then to communicate that clearly so that someone else knows if what they're after aligns with what you're after. So, in terms of doing the work, I think maybe being clear about what it is you want is part of it. I think making sure that you're in a place where you have a lot of self-care skills, a lot of resilience skills, because as we were just saying, it's a lot. Well, it doesn't have to be a lot, but I'm just not someone that dates casually. I'm not a one night stand fling sort of person. Okay. So maybe I made it a lot. Maybe I made it more intense than it needed to be. But I think it's important to be able to kind of roll with the ups and the downs of it and be able to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, be able to bounce back.
I almost feel the need to reword what you just said because you said maybe I made it more intense
Yeah.
than it needed to be. I think you made it more
Mhm.
intense than the other 98% of the profiles, right? But I would challenge you, you made it as intense as you absolutely needed it to be,
Yes.
Especially since you knew what you were looking
to
for.
respect yourself and your boundaries. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. 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 And Cheryl, when you said that, you just made me think of something. one of the reasons that I approached it with some degree of rigor or intensity is, I had alluded at the outset of our conversation that after losing my spouse, I went through a domino effect of really serious, catastrophic losses and traumas. I just got hammered. My spouse passed in 2019, and through 2024, I had 13 major, catastrophic, life altering, how do you come back from this things happen to me. They affected my career, my finances, my health, my relationships, my home. Every area of my life felt like it was burned to the ground and that I had to start over again. And none of the things that happened were at my own doing, right? But I was just kind of getting pickleball's the craze right now. I felt like I was being, knocked back and forth between these two paddles constantly, right? And mind you, all the while knowing that I still have to go to work because I no longer have a second income to fall back on. I can't just collapse. And all the while spending 40 hours a week as a mental health provider, centering other people, their pain, their fear, their needs, right? So I hope, knock on wood, that I'm out the other side of that now. That's a chapter that's closed. But part of why I approached dating with some seriousness is because I know what it took for me to get through those years. And I know what it took for me to regain my footing, let alone find any degree of joy again in life, right? And I'm not willing to give away what I fought so hard. I mean, I felt flattened in ways that I can't even articulate. And the particulars of everything that happened are not important for your listeners for this particular podcast. But let's just say it was 13 things like losing a spouse that started with losing my spouse. And every time I thought it can't get worse, something even more unbelievably catastrophic happened. I am tough as nails and deeply resilient, but going through all of that aged me deeply, right? I'm not the same person in some ways. Well, that's not true. In some ways I'm the same person because I've always chosen to be someone who tries to learn from what I go through, try to deepen compassion for others. I do not feel sorry for myself. I don't get bitter. I don't get mean. Like the way I react to difficulties is the same. But that compacted period of my life rearranged the inside of me in permanent ways. I am not the same. And I am protecting myself fiercely because it took everything in me to come back from the dead, so to speak. Those years of my life chewed me up and spit me out. So I think I did bring some intensity to online dating, knowing that someone had to be at minimum as good to me as my friends are, because my friends carried me through those 13 catastrophes. My family carried me through those 13 catastrophes. Someone had to be at least on that level for me to let them in my life, because I'm just not going to give away what I fought so hard to put back inside myself again. And someone had to be able, non-negotiable, had to be able to offer some reciprocity, that they weren't going to be someone who takes more than they give. Overall, obviously day to day that changes in a relationship, but I mean on the whole. I was really deliberate in thinking I can't date someone who hasn't shown up for themselves in their own life, because not only do I do that for a living, but I'm not going to give away what I fought so hard to give to myself to get through the last few years. And so that's kind of where my boundary was. Now that I bummed out the whole
No.
podcast.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I'm just sitting here listening to think about how resilient you
Yeah.
are. And
Well, and the powerful message, right? Like
Yes.
you put it out there. We're not talking to you today because we thought online dating was supposed to be easy, or that we thought dating
Right.
when you're close to
Right.
50 was supposed to be easy, right? Like
Right.
that's not why we're having this conversation. What you thought would be easy was finding other people putting in the same effort.
Exactly.
But the message I'm feeling in my core right now is protect yourself fiercely.
Yes, you have to be on your own side. And that means being really clear before you go into this about who you are, what your boundaries are, where you can be flexible, where you can't, what in your life is not negotiable, what is. So I think it's important to keep in mind that when people are doing any kind of dating, online or not, that we need to give each other the benefit of the doubt, because it is a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Like it's a little scary to put yourself out there and know that strangers are going to be swiping and evaluating and making decisions about you. And so I think it's important to lead with compassion, a sense of humor, and give people a little grace. But I will also say that society conditions women to take that too far. Women are socialized to give men the benefit of the doubt, to justify or explain, and do a lot of psychological cartwheels to justify why a picture might be problematic, why a written profile might be problematic, or why something that might initially seem like it's fake. Maybe it's a fake celebrity account. Maybe it seems like AI. These things that are problematic, I've seen and known a lot of women, friends of mine, as well as clients in my practice, go to great lengths to explain, excuse, justify, or rationalize some of that. And I think that's an important piece of advice I would offer anybody who wants to go into online dating is yes, recognize that, the men on there are human just like you. Maybe they're nervous like you. Profiles are not going to be perfect, but it's really important not to go so far as to make yourself vulnerable. So that looks like asking critical questions. It looks like critical thinking about someone else's decisions and motives. It looks like maybe running some decisions about different profiles you're engaging with past trusted friends. It looks like listening to people if they're telling you that they're skeptical that the person you're talking to might not be real. I think it's easy to get carried away in a romantic fantasy because it's a vulnerable thing. Put yourself out there in online dating. And we all fundamentally want to be chosen. But that desire to be chosen can make us more vulnerable and less critical around some potential issues that we see in those profiles. I'm not saying to, and I didn't do this, I'm not saying to act like a diva. I'm not saying to be arrogant or stuck up or look down on other people. That is not at all what I mean. I don't mean to have, to wall yourself off and not let anybody in. That's not what I mean whatsoever. I just mean that ideally a relationship should make the hard things in your life a little softer
Mm.
and the good things in your life even better, right? So if I already know I've got my own back in life, I'm paying my own bills, I have my own home, I've got a job, I don't need someone to step in and do all of that. I need someone who can emotionally self-manage to be somebody's partner. I like my life as a single person, and I think most people that I have encountered online do not. And so one of the things I've noticed with online dating with all these profiles is that online dating is serving like maybe doom scrolling on the phone or flipping through Netflix. I noticed my impression was that a lot of men who had profiles up were unable to sit with themselves. And online dating was another way to avoid doing that. They were hiding from themselves and from their lives. And it was just clear. It was clear in what they said and what they didn't say in their choice of photos. I'm not happy. I don't like myself. Maybe you can distract me from that. That was the vibe over and over and over. I really enjoyed meeting the men with profiles where it was clear that they were showing up on the same level I was, except for the one that was cheating, right? Because that was all false. But I would say if you want to get in there to online dating, maybe be prepared that if you're going to put a lot of effort in, you might not find the same.
Lee, I know that we've sort of jumped back and forth between two different time periods
Yes.
that you engaged with online dating. And the second time around was in widowhood.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if
Hmm.
there are any differences that you noticed or want to talk about between those two time periods.
It's funny when I ended my apps, when they expired and I chose not to renew them, I noticed that for 6 weeks or so after they ended, I felt like I was grieving. And it was really bothering me that I felt so sad and could not put my finger on why. I was saying to myself, all right, I like my single life. That's already very fulfilling. So I'm not missing something. I was saying to myself, I met some decent people, but it's not like I fell in love and then lost something. I kept checking in with myself and saying, this is not grief about my late husband. I could not quite figure out what was going on with me because I felt like I was grieving hard. And I had an aha moment where I realized that at the outset of going on these dating apps as a widow, I had expected that my grief over my late husband was going to get triggered. As I mentioned, it did at the very beginning, but that did not play out for me. What I ended up realizing that had actually been causing my grief was it was not that I expected to fall in love during my 6 months of exploring online dating. It's that I was grieving that I had expected to find other profiles out there that had put in the same level of effort as me. And what clicked, what I realized was causing such heavy emotion for me was thinking, I think in the back of my mind, I had told myself that it was unlikely I was going to fall in love in my first 6 months back in the dating world. And I was fine with that. But when I found that, in looking at over 5,000 profiles, less than 2% showed any degree of effort, what happened there was I lost hope that I would ever find somebody because I began to think, oh, I didn't think it would happen in the first 6 months, but I thought it would happen someday. But if this is what the pool is like, and there's so few people making an effort, maybe it isn't going to happen again. The 6 weeks of grieving, it took time to get there and to realize that I was grieving what turned out to be a lack of effort that I thought I would find in more profiles, certainly more than 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Once that made sense to me, the feelings lifted and I was fine. But I hadn't expected that form of grief. I went into this experience expecting grief about my late husband. I hadn't expected grief around the potential loss of hope that maybe there isn't a pool out there putting in the same level of effort as I had thought I might find.
It's really interesting.
So, in terms of, we've talked about strategies for anybody who wants to try online dating. I would say you might be surprised at ways in which grief, as well as joy or laughter or amusement or shock or any number of emotions, hit you in this process. I was surprised by grief that came in this particular way. So, expect the unexpected.
You mentioned, over the course of the last 6 months. So, from those kind of words, are you taking a break? Are you keeping with it? What's
Mhm.
next for you?
I would say, in fact, let me consult my nerdy little statistics here.
I
So over
love the
the course of
statistic.
6 months, like I said, I interacted online with about 2% of 5,000 matches. And my brain is tired right now, so I don't remember what head count that turned out to be. But that led to in real life dating of something like 6 to 8 people. The one that I referenced who was doing some things behind my back was the only one that I truly, genuinely felt there was the potential to fall in love with. And I'm grateful that I learned who he really was and what his character was. But that one took me a few months to get over. It really did. In fact, I said to him when I found out the truth of what was happening, I said to him, my story, the list of things I've had to kind of crawl through to get back to functioning again. And you should have been such a great thing on the other side of that, but you became one more thing I had to heal from, one more thing I had to cry over, one more thing that caused me pain and took me down. That to me is the most unforgivable part. If you wanted to date more than one person at once, fine. All you had to do was tell me that. And instead of saying, would you like to be my girlfriend? Just say, I'm not ready to be serious. I want to date multiple people. Fine. But it was the lying and the deception that put me in that place of cratering for a while again. That one, my feelings were deep and that one took me time to come back from. And my apps were all expiring while I was doing that work. And I wasn't interested in paying to extend them. I
Mhm.
thought I would just take the last few months off to kind of breathe and recalibrate. Then, towards the very end, before my apps expired, I did meet someone fabulous who I've been seeing casually for a couple of months. There isn't any problem or issue there. It's just that he's international of origin, even though he's in the US now, but between family obligations and the nature of his work, he is traveling internationally quite a lot. He was honest and upfront that he's not available for a committed, serious relationship right now. So it's a very, very high quality connection that I'm loving, but it's an infrequent connection. And I think I'm kind of letting that be what it is and seeing where that might go if his schedule is to kind of calm down a little bit in the future, which he said he thinks it might. At the same time, I'm taking a break from formally investing time, money, and effort into the apps. And maybe I'll pick them up again. We'll just see. We'll see what happens with the person I'm seeing right now. He's a very high quality match. I just wish he was more available.
So I know throughout this whole conversation, we've talked about tips and things like that for the listener who's maybe using this kind of as the playbook. And after some of those stories are maybe saying, "Whoa, Nelly, I'm not ready to go there." But if they're really kind of thinking about it and saying, "You know what I'm doing now isn't working and I'm ready to have a partner in my life, whether it be a first time or a partner again." what are those tips? But you mentioned a few. What else? What else are some other ones?
Yeah, I think one last tip that was helpful for me was doing what a lot of women would do, which is thinking about safety. So of course, making sure that if I'm going to go out on a date, that we're meeting at a public place, they're not picking me up, I'm not disclosing my home address, that I'm being cautious about disclosing the name of my employer until I necessarily know this person well. Things like if someone invites me to their home, I'm certainly letting friends know the address I'm going to be at and who I'm going to be with,
Yeah.
all of those safety checks. But one additional thing I did that I would definitely recommend to someone who's looking to do online dating is to pick up an email address and a phone number that you use for dating only. For example, I created an email address that's send mail to Lee at the domain, just and only for this. So there's no last name associated with it. And I created a Google phone number specifically for dating so that if someone wanted to text or chat off of the apps, we could do that without me revealing my actual phone number. And I did that in part because of someone I had dated when I was first doing online dating all those years ago, who ended up being a really scary individual. And I ended up having to change my number and do a lot of different things. But here's why I really recommend the email address and the spoof phone number, because this is an excellent way to judge how a man feels about your safety. When I was in conversation with someone who wanted to be in touch off of the app, and I explained that I'm going to give you this email and this phone, this is not my actual phone number, and here's why I do this, here's why I protect my safety, I could learn instantly based on their reaction whether I even wanted to take the conversation further.
Wow.
Because some would react by saying, absolutely, that makes all the sense in the world. I'm so glad you're taking care of yourself. There's a lot of scary people out there. I'm on board. You don't have to share anything with me till you're ready. I had others who pushed back right away. I also had men who pushed back saying something along the lines of like, actually, it's far scarier and far riskier for men to give their data out than for women. It's much worse for them, right? It's almost, I mean, yes, it's a step to protect safety, but it's also a little bit of a test. It's a little bit of a test to see how they react to you taking care of yourself. And that was an additional way that I screened for who I was and was not going to engage with.
I love that. I think that because you baked your cake first, you know yourself and what tests will give you
Yes.
that knowledge that you need. What an amazing way to protect yourself. Yes, but also to just know yourself again and know who and what you're looking for. Because we didn't come here today to just laugh about men,
Right.
right? We all have men we love,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
But to know and honor and respect yourself enough to be seeking the man or that will be a good partner.
Right. And as you just said, there are so many men that we love. I've got wonderful friends that I think of almost as brothers. I've got great male coworkers. I've had great male bosses, great male neighbors. There's a lot of terrific men out there, but people can be anything they want to be in a virtual context. And when you put a little bit of a barrier or a little bit of an obstacle by saying, this is how I handle my phone number, this is how I handle my email until I really know someone, if a man can't exhibit frustration tolerance or take the perspective of why in this society where sexual assault and violence are really high rates, right? If they can't take that perspective and prioritize your safety right from the get-go, it doesn't bode well long term, but it's also not even courteous. It tells me that they are out of touch with what it is to live as a woman in our society. So for me, that was that was just a gatekeeping action that was really useful for me.
As we're kind of getting ready to wrap up, is there anything else that you think we should know, our listeners should know? Anything else that you've learned about yourself?
I think it's important to remember that nothing other people do is because of you. It's because of them. And that includes whether they treat you badly with online dating or they treat you well. That's coming out of who they are. I think that's really important to keep in mind. I think it's important to be able to take some risks and open yourself up to life and to the potential of meeting someone while you're also at the same time making the best single life possible for yourself. So I would say, I guess the key takeaway for me is kind of being able to hold opposites at the same time. And maybe that's the therapist in me. But with online dating, can you hold out hope for a romantic connection at the same time as you let go of attachment to an outcome? Can you view it seriously as a part-time job while also being lighthearted and playful about it? Can you connect with someone and maybe it's a great connection, but it's not a lasting connection? Can you be invested but for a short time? Like I think about all of the opposites that it takes mentally and emotionally to do this. Like, can you seek a partner but also be your own partner in a way? I think the ability to integrate opposite ways of thinking, feeling, and doing is a way to get through online dating while staying true to yourself and taking good care of yourself. See, you can't take the therapist out of
You wouldn't want to. Those are great,
and make
great things to
sure
talk
if you
about.
do online dating that you're having dinner with your girlfriends on Monday nights and telling them all your crazy stories.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
You're right.
We'll be back here next week to hear what else has happened.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really a fun
Thank
conversation.
you.
Is Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks
Thank you
for
for
opening up
joining us.
and sharing your heart and experiences and making us laugh at the same time.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed myself.
Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.